Hello everyone, semi-retired Bob here. I talk about the carnivore diet, all things related to the carnivore diet, and miscellaneous odds and ends. Today we're going to take a quick little look at studies. We all know I don't do science real well, but I'm going to give this a shot because I'm seeing a lot of comments, both on my channel and other places, where people are saying things like, well, I just watched this video by such and such a person, and he was quoting this study, and now I'm convinced that we need to have some fiber in our diet, or now I'm convinced I need to eat this or that, or whatever. So I thought it would be beneficial to just go over some of the basics of studies, things that you need to keep in mind as you're watching some of these people that basically they're giving you their idealistic opinions on how you should eat. I've made my views on a certain fruit and honey eating doctor very clear, and I've said many times I have nothing against the guy. I think a lot of his stuff is great, and I would jump at the chance to meet him in person. But I think the advice he gives for the general public is not very good, because there aren't that many people. If you're young, metabolically healthy, you have an extremely active lifestyle, like say, surfing 3 hours a day or whatever it happens to be, you're going to be just fine. But for the majority of the public out there, we're just, trying to get a little healthier, trying to be a little better at what we're doing. I think it's going to lead to a lot of problems. So a few of the things that I wanted to go over are just here on studies. The first thing I want to address is people are like, oh, well, this carnivore meat only thing, this is obviously just a recent fad and it's going to fade away like everything else. Quick show of hands down in the comments, how many people have ever had a Salisbury steak? Do you know who that was named after? Dr. Salisbury. Why is that important, Bob? Well, let me tell you. Dr. Salisbury published a book called Relation of Ailment and Diseases in 1888. That's 1888. And basically what he said in the book was that, for many inflammatory diseases, the eating of ruminant meat and water only will cure many inflammatory diseases. He knew that back in 1888. Now, we talk about the long history, several thousands of years ago. If eating ruminant meat was bad for us, we wouldn't be here as a species. Because if you go back to the, caveman days and the cave paintings, you see lots of cave paintings of them sitting around picking their kale and spinach and spraying it down with vegetable oil, right? No. I've never seen a cave painting of a vegetable. It's everybody getting together, grabbing their spears and their bows and their rocks, and they're going out en masse to take down great big ruminant animals. And that's how we lived. And if eating ruminant meat was bad for us, we wouldn't be here as a species. So that's something to keep in mind as you're listening to some of these people that give the advice, oh, well, I've got this study to share with you. First thing to be aware of, right off the bat, before you look at anything else, scroll down to the bottom and look for conflicts of interest. That's a really big one, conflicts of interest. You didn't used to have to do this. I mean, back in my day, if there was a research, let's talk about, driving a truck, if you were trying to come up with ways to make truck drivers safer on the road, Well, they have a vested interest in being able to go as far and as fast as they want. They don't, there are a lot of us back in the day that didn't really have that much regard for safety. We wanted to make as many miles as we could to make the most money we could. So if you were doing a safety study to come up with new rules for truck drivers, you probably wouldn't let any truck drivers sit in on that research study. They would be the subject of the study, but they wouldn't get to analyze the data. But now it seems like, some of these studies I've heard people quoting, you go and look at them, and the conflict of interest page is pages and pages long. So, you have to, if the conflict of interest is more than a line or two, you really need to examine whether or not you think that's a worthwhile study to even bother digging into. Now, some of the things to look at, correlations. They will make lots and lots of correlations. Well, because we see this, and we see this, that's probably a good indication that this is not, that this is a correlation, that we should pay attention to this. Well, you have to be real careful when you're looking at things like that. The example that Professor K uses on his channel quite often is that if we were to go to the beach on a bright, sunny summer day and look at the number of sunburn patients that showed up at the first aid tent, and we were to look at ice cream sales at the ice cream stand on a busy, sunny, warm day at the beach, there would probably be a correlation there. So obviously, to help lower the amount of sunburns at the beach on bright, sunny days, we need to stop selling ice cream, right? No, that's just dumb. So you need to be aware of, there is no causation in a correlative study. They're just observing that X happened and Y happened at the same time, but there's no way to put them together. But there are a lot of people that tell you that because the ice cream sales and the sunburns go up at the same rate, that's obviously how you fix the sunburn, is to stop selling ice cream. And it's just dumb. So you need to be aware of that. One of the other big things that's out there are these epidemiological studies that basically they use food questionnaires. And these are very common. You can gain some information from them, but you cannot make any hard cause and effect statements because you're just asking people's opinions or asking them to remember what they ate. Let's try a couple of these. Jump down in the comments and tell me how many eggs you've eaten in the last 6 months. And now that you're done guessing with that, go ahead and jump down in the comments and tell me how many ounces of oats you've eaten in the last 6 months. Now, those of you that are on the carnivore diet and you're more than 6 months, that's real easy, 0. But you see what I'm getting at. And some of the things are just dumb, like some of the things that they just can't control for. When people put down that they've been eating pizza, you know what category that goes under? Red meat, because there might be some meat on that pizza. Therefore, when they ask questions about eating pizza, that ends up in the red meat category. And I can tell you from personal experience that, people that are eating a lot of pizza don't tend to, in general, take care of themselves as much. If you're asking somebody how many hot dogs they've had, well, you have to also take into consideration what are they putting on that hot dog? I mean, are they just having a hot dog with a whole wheat bun and maybe a little mustard? Or are they having chili and cheese and a side of fries? And if they're at a ball game, probably a beer or 3. I mean, there's so many things that you just can't tell from these food questionnaires that most of these studies are poor at best and useless. But there are a lot of people that put a lot of faith in these. I'm not one of them. Now, there are some experimental design studies that actually have a little bit of meaning to them because, we've talked about confounding variables, like what are they eating with their hot dogs? That's a confounding variable that you can't control. But what they did, there was a study down in Ecuador, and they took both groups from the same socioeconomic area so that, well, let's just say, the poor kids from, I don't mean to say that they were poor, but, it's just, if you take a group from this area of the city and take another group from the same area, odds are that they're going to be having similar nutrition, similar environmental exposures, and everything else. And what they were looking at was a way to combat stunting, stunted growth in children, because, we're seeing a lot of that around the world. And it's not because they don't want to eat better, it's because they just don't have the resources to eat better, so they eat what they can get their hands on to keep from starving. And what they did in this study is they gave one group nothing extra, and they gave the other group 1 egg per day. And just the addition of that 1 egg per day made a vast difference in how well those children were doing. Now, I say vast difference, that's not a very scientific term, but I'm trying to keep this, I'm not actually going to dig out the study and show it to you. You can look it up for yourself. I didn't write down the numbers, but they were pretty important, and you could see that there was a definite advantage to adding just an egg to some of these kids' diets. And that's a fairly well-designed study of an experimental nature, as best you can do, because you can't actually just lock people in a lab for more than a week or two. And then, there are studies that do that, but if you lock, people in a lab for a week or two and study their blood results or whatever, you can't really extrapolate beyond the 2-week period how much, you can't say, well, this 2-week study shows us beyond a shadow of a doubt that 40 years from now, these are the effects you're going to have. You just can't do that. And then amongst those experimental designs, they can also do what's called a meta-analysis. And if you see one of those, what they'll do is they'll take many of those studies and put them all together looking for one specific thing. And remember, just like in everything else, garbage in, garbage out. So if they're not using the good, well-designed studies, then you can't really tell anything from those either. But if they're combining lots of these little studies, like the Ecuador study where they added the egg to the kids, then you can actually tell something from that, because you have enough data points to get a general overview. That's, we've talked about this before. Let's take the BMI, the body mass index scale. Just applying it to one person individually, it's not a very good scale, because, when Arnold Schwarzenegger was winning Mr. Universe contests, by the BMI scale, he was overweight. I challenge you to go back to any of those and try to find fat on that guy. There just wasn't any. But when looking at an entire town or an entire region, say a state or an entire country or whatever, when looking at large groups of people, it can give you a fairly good overview of what's happening within that region of people. So hopefully this will keep you from getting sucked into the nonsense that's out there on many of the channels, where, you know, this person or that person has a new study to show you. Hopefully some of this made sense to you. That's what I've got for you today, folks. Don't forget to get out there and be 1% better today. Have a great day, everyone. I will see you tomorrow.